Welcome to the Robotics Through Science Fiction podcast. I'm Dr. Robin Murphy, and let's talk about Edgar Allan Poe and how he wrote the very first cyborg story. So first off, did you like The Pale Blue Eye, which imagines Edgar Allan Poe's time at West Point, where he really was in real life a cadet there? In the movie, he helps Christian Bale solve a murder with occult overtones, and there's the implication that it inspired his detective and horror fiction. But did you know that Poe also wrote science fiction and what appears to be the very first short story on cyborgs, The Man That Was Used Up? It was in 1839 and it was based on his military experience. Of course, the term cyborg wouldn't appear until 1972 with Martin Caidin's book called Cyborg, which was made into the $6 Million Man series. The Man That Used Up is a minor Poe story. You can read it in a few minutes for free. And sorry, Edgar, about that free part. I do wish there was a way to go back in time with the TARDIS and pay you royalties for your work, or at least bring you forward in time to see what you accomplished, like the 11th Doctor did with Vincent van Gogh. Anyway, back to the story. The protagonist is a young army officer. He wants to meet the famous general, but there are rumors and innuendos, and no one wants to say anything. And so it looks like we're in one of Poe's detective stories. Well, the officer steels himself to figure out what's going on. He travels to the general's remote antebellum mansion, and seeing no activity, kind of creepy, decides to enter. And eventually, in a bedroom, he finds what looks like to be a pile of human limbs. The limbs begin to twitch and move, suggesting that no, we're not in the detective story, we're in the horror story genre. But no, the protagonist then hears the voice of the general apologizing and calling for his manservant. The servant then reassembles the general from all the parts as he narrates about how he lost that arm at that Indian skirmish campaign and that eye at that battle and so on. And the general provides a running commentary on who makes the best of each type of prosthetic. And he has that same matter-of-factness that the characters debate the merits of those knockoff Nikon eye transplant in Gibson's Neuromancer series. Well, case solved. It was a detective story after all. The general was a man used up by the ongoing Indian Wars, and now there was almost nothing left of his body. Yet his intellect remained, and there was no tinge of bitterness or depression, just that gung-ho, serve my country with manly honor attitude on life. So where did Poe get the idea? Well, it turns out that Pale Blue Eye got some parts right. Poe actually did go to the U.S. Military Academy, but before that, Poe was actually enlisted in the Army in 1927 and made Sergeant Major. Then he got into West Point for officer training in 1930. By 1931, he had decided he'd had enough of the military, and he got himself deliberately court-martialed in order to be discharged. So Poe had significant military experience, and it would have been impossible for him not to have known or met General Winfield Scott. Scott was the grand old man of the Army of the day, that kind of Chuck Yeager type of character, the cool guy that everyone in the military wanted to be like. And Scott really did seem to have a penchant for getting badly wounded and beat up, although he didn't have any amputations. And so he probably was the real inspiration for the story. From a technical perspective, the two big challenges in cyborgs are the biomechanics. Okay, after all, hands and feet are complicated, and tissue interfaces. It turns out copper wires in the brain are actually poisonous. Now, sci-fi tends to ignore those types of issues and concentrate either on the uses of cyborgs or whether they are human or both. RoboCop nailed that combination, right? But the discussion of humanity hides the more immediate legal and dignity considerations of cyborgs. If my prosthetic hand has a built-in USB drive, Can my employer make me remove my hand at work to prevent industrial espionage? And oh yeah, what about all the airport security lines? Well, there are no cyborgs or robots of any kind in The Pale Blue Eye. It's just an enjoyable period detective piece. And wasn't Dudley Dursley from Harry Potter, the actor Henry Melling, mesmerizing as Edgar Allan Poe? I mean, he was unrecognizable. He lost a lot of weight at the end of the Harry Potter movies. Anyway, the writing and Mellon's acting really makes for a sympathetic portrait of Poe. And the movie has dozens of subtle Easter egg callouts to Poe's most famous works. The man that was used up is not one of them. But still, it's pretty amazing that Poe saw cyborgs coming. If you do want to learn more about how real-world cyborgs stack up against science fiction ones, my Science Robotics article is on the Robotics Through Science Fiction website behind the paywall. And Science Robotics has a lot more articles on the big challenges and advances in cyborgs. And of course, the Springer Handbook of Robotics is always a good reference. I also have links to other works of science fiction on the topics page that you can use to teach about cyborgs as well. So please do visit the website and sign up for our newsletter so you won't miss a thing.